There is a Swedish word that has no English equivalent, decluttering. Break it apart and you get death and stadning, cleaning. Death cleaning. It sounds morbid. It sounds like something you'd whisper about, not put in a book title. But the woman who wrote this book, a Swedish artist somewhere between 80 and 100 years old, as she likes to put it, says it is the single least sad thing she has ever done. She has moved 17 times. She has buried a husband of 48 years. She has emptied her own parents' apartment after her mother died. And every single time, she has learned the same lesson. If you don't deal with your stuff before you die, someone else will have to deal with it after, and it will be a burden, not a gift. This is The Gentle Art of Swedish Death Cleaning by Margareta Magnusson. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why a book about getting rid of your belongings has quietly become one of the most talked about life philosophies to come out of Scandinavia. Let's get one thing straight immediately. Death cleaning is not about dusting or mopping. Magnusson is very clear on this. It's a permanent form of organizing your life so that your everyday living runs more smoothly. And so that when you're gone, the people who loved you aren't left digging through decades of forks, photographs, and expired vitamins to figure out what mattered. You don't need to be dying to start. She says if you can barely close your dresser drawers or shut your closet door, it's time, even if you're only in your 30s. Death cleaning isn't triggered by calendar. It's triggered by clutter. And here's the twist she wants you to sit with. This isn't really a chore you're doing for other people. Yes, it saves your children and loved ones from wasting their precious time sorting through your possessions after you're gone. But Magnusson insists it's just as much a gift to yourself. Going through your own belongings, really looking at them, remembering where they came from is, in her words, rewarding. It's a chance to relive your own life, one object at a time, while you're still around to enjoy the memory. Magnusson didn't come to this idea in the abstract. The first time she encountered death cleaning was when her mother died and she had to help her father move into a smaller apartment. Going through the home, she found handwritten notes pinned to clothes and tucked into drawers. Instructions her mother had quietly left behind. An old writing suit should go to a museum with a contact name attached. Certain books should be returned to their original owners. Her mother, sensing her time was limited, had already started death cleaning without ever calling it that. Magnusson says she felt consoled by those little notes, like her mother was still present, still taking care of her family from beyond. That experience planted the seed. Years later, she went through it again, this time death cleaning her own home after her husband of 48 years passed away following a long illness. She had to compress a spacious house with a garden into a 2-room apartment on her own because her 5 children were scattered across the world in places like the US, Africa, and Japan. It took nearly a year. And in hindsight, she says doing it alone might actually have been the right call because her husband would have kept everything, even the smallest nuts and bolts, she jokes, and her kids would have wanted to save absolutely everything too. So where do you begin? Magnusson's advice is refreshingly unsentimental. Start with the big, boring stuff first. Attics, basements, storage closets, garages. Do not start with photographs or personal letters. Those are an emotional swamp, and if you dive in first, you'll get stuck reminiscing for hours and never make progress. Start instead with furniture, clothes, and household items that carry less emotional weight, and save the deeply personal things, the photos, the letters, for last, when you've built momentum and confidence. As you sort, ask yourself one blunt question about anything you own. Will anyone I know be happier if I save this? If the honest answer is no, let it go. She organizes things into simple categories: give away, throw away, sell, or keep. When she downsized her own home, she literally labeled every room on paper with columns for exactly these categories, so nothing got missed when charities or the Red Cross came to collect. One of her more delightfully practical tips: before you even call the moving company, get graph paper, draw your new home's floor plan to scale, then cut out little paper rectangles representing your furniture and physically arrange them on the page. It sounds almost like a kid's craft project, but it means you know exactly what fits before a single box gets carried up the stairs, and nothing shows up in the new place only to be sent right back out. Magnusson is a big believer in outside opinions. just not necessarily from family. Family members carry sentimental attachment to your things, which clouds judgment. Instead, she suggests inviting a friend or even someone younger with a totally different perspective to walk through your home with you. Come prepared with a written list of real questions you've been stuck on. Which charity takes books? Whether that pretty but worthless painting has any value? Whether it's okay to hand down grandpa's old samurai sword? A second opinion, she says, makes decisions so much easier. That said, she's also candid that this process can be lonely, especially if you're doing it after losing a spouse. She admits she hated asking for help and did almost all of her own third death cleaning solo. Her advice isn't never accept help. It's know yourself and don't force a process that doesn't fit your life. This might be the most quietly powerful chapter in the whole book. Magnusson points out that many adult children are terrified to bring up death or even downsizing with their aging parents. It feels rude, invasive, taboo. But she argues the opposite. Silence is what actually hurts everyone. Her suggestion is simple and gentle. Sit down with a parent and ask something like, "You have so many lovely things. Have you thought about what you'd like to happen to them?" Or bring it up through safety. Loose rugs and towering stacks of books are genuine fall hazards for older people, and that can be an easy, carrying entry point into a bigger conversation. If they deflect the first time, that's fine. Leave it and try again gently a few weeks later. The goal isn't to force anything. It's to open a door that's been closed for too long. Magnusson can't resist a little humor along the way. She jokes that the Vikings actually had death cleaning figured out. They buried the dead together with their belongings, so the living wouldn't be haunted by drawers full of a dead relative's stuff. With all the junk people have today, she writes, we'd have to be buried in Olympic-sized swimming pools. She also borrows a lyric from ABBA's Annie Frid Lyngstad, only count the happy moments, and forget the ones that cause you sorrow, as a kind of guiding mantra. Her family's old dinner table, the site of countless imaginary sailing races with forks and spoons as boats, almost got given away until one of her children suddenly needed a table. She uses it to make a broader point. You can't force cherished objects onto people who don't want them, but you can hope, and sometimes the universe cooperates. Then the book gets wonderfully specific, category by category. Clothes. As her lifestyle changes with age, so should your wardrobe. Ski gear, ballet shoes, scuba equipment. Sell or donate what you genuinely won't use again. She notes something sweet. Today's young people are proud to wear secondhand clothes, calling it vintage, a hopeful sign for a less wasteful future. Children's clothing is its own emotional category. She kept a box of her baby's handmade clothes in the attic for years, hoping for grandchildren, and eventually got 8 of them. Books. Hard to sell, easy to donate. Let family and friends browse and take what they like. She once found herself unable to give away her family Bibles, full of handwritten birth and death dates going back generations. But everything else went, including 28 heavy encyclopedia volumes she donated to a local school, along with a bookshelf to hold them. The kitchen might be the most brutally honest chapter. Magnusson admits she has collected exotic utensils her whole life. Porcelain soup spoons, coconut shell ladles, a beloved walk from her years living in Asia. But she's learned to place them thoughtfully with people who'll actually use them, rather than let them sit in a drawer. Her rule for dishware: if you still entertain, keep exactly one set that matches your table size, no more. She also confesses she's down to just 2 real cookbooks. The internet does the rest, but she's kept the handwritten family recipes. Her mother's meatloaf, a neighbor's rosehip marmalade, dishes collected from friends around the world during years abroad. Those personal recipes, unlike printed cookbooks, are worth preserving. One of the book's funniest and most useful chapters deals with what she calls hidden, dangerous, and secret things. While clearing her father's old medical office, she found a block of arsenic in his desk drawer, leftover fear from a possible wartime invasion decades earlier. In her mother's linen cabinet, tucked behind neatly folded towels, she discovered hidden cartons of cigarettes. Her advice is blunt and oddly liberating. Everyone has a secret vice or two, and if it won't hurt anyone, let sleeping secrets lie. But if you're holding on to letters, diaries, or objects that could genuinely embarrass or hurt your family after you're gone, destroy them now. Feed them to what she affectionately calls her hungry shredder. Then there's the man cave chapter, her husband's meticulously organized tool shed. Every hammer outlined on the wall, so nothing went missing. She found it surprisingly painless to clear out, mostly because she felt no personal attachment to the tools themselves, and because young men eager to start their own workshops happily took everything off her hands within days. She also tackles the awkward problem of unwanted gifts, things given with love that you never actually wanted. Her solution, rather than lying, be honest, or use what she calls the foolscap trick, Swedish for cabinet of ugly things, where you display a gift briefly when the giver visits, then quietly let it go later. Because if you keep displaying unwanted gifts forever, relatives will just keep giving you more of them. Magnusson draws a careful, important line here. A genuine collector, someone who systematically gathers stamps or coins, or even, in one story she tells, 1,000 egg cups from around the world, brings order and joy to their collecting. It has purpose and structure, and often brings pleasure to others too, the way museums do. But hoarding is different. It's accumulation without meaning, and she treats it with real compassion, noting it's now recognized as an actual condition that may need professional help, not judgment. The garden chapter is bittersweet. She loved her old garden deeply and grieves losing it when she moved to an apartment, but she's found real contentment in a small balcony and a shared community garden instead. The pets chapter might be the most emotional in the whole book. She recounts a parade of family animals across decades, a guinea pig, dogs left behind during international quarantine, a Great Dane named Taxes who was too old and too sick to survive a move, and a red cat named Clumpaduns who mourned her dying husband and then died himself soon after. Her point, delivered gently. Sometimes death cleaning means making the hardest decision of all, letting a beloved living creature go with dignity, because loving something responsibly sometimes means not clinging to it. Magnusson saves photographs for near the end of the book, and for good reason. She calls them the hardest things to deal with, on every level. Sorting through decades of family photos is deeply sentimental, and she warns that what feels precious to you might mean nothing to your children, and vice versa. Her practical rule: discard duplicates and any photo where someone looks genuinely terrible, and always try to write names on the back, because once you're gone, no one else may know who these people even were. She turned this into a genuinely lovely family tradition, sorting old photos into envelopes labeled with each child's name and handing them out at a birthday gathering, watching her grown children laugh and gasp over their own childhoods. Not everything gets the shredder treatment. Magnusson admits some objects defy logic. Worn-out childhood teddy bears too precious to discard, forgotten stuffed animals that once meant more than any human relative. Her solution for the truly personal, meaningful only to her items, old love letters, ticket stubs, a dried flower, is what she calls her throwaway box, a single, modestly sized shoe box of things with zero value to anyone else that her children can simply toss, unopened, after she's gone, no questions asked, no guilt attached. Even in her 80s and beyond, Magnusson has adapted death cleaning to modern life. She keeps all her passwords in a small black notebook so her family can access her accounts when she's gone. A wonderfully practical piece of advice in an age where so much of our lives live behind login screens. She's digitized old home videos and cassette tapes, then thrown away the originals, keeping only what a son-in-law who collects vinyl actually wanted from her old records. By the book's close, Magnusson circles back to her central idea. Death cleaning is not primarily about death. It's about living the rest of your life a little lighter, a little freer, surrounded only by things that still mean something to you. She's candid that she's not qualified to give legal advice about wills or end-of-life medical decisions. She calls herself simply a death cleaner, but she's emphatic that everyone, whether they have children or not, owes it to somebody to sort out their own life rather than leave it to a stranger in an auction truck. Give things away. Tell the story behind them. An ordinary desk, she writes, becomes extraordinary once you know who sat at it and what they wrote. And if there's one line that sums up the whole philosophy of this odd, funny, deeply humane little book, it's this: death cleaning isn't sad. It's the last great act of taking care of the people you love, and quietly of taking care of yourself too. If this book resonated with you, imagine actually sitting down this weekend and clearing out just one drawer using her rule. Will anyone be happier if I keep this? Let me know in the comments what your hungry shredder moment would be, and subscribe for more book breakdowns like this one every week.